Hello all and welcome back to Shatter Our Souls with Novaria. Today, under normal circumstances, would be considered the finale, if we will. The end of the main game and the start of the DLCs of various sizes would start officially here. Now, reality is that we're not jumping into the DLC yet, but next week we'll be jumping into Jacob's Cove. Now, reality about Borderlands systems and setup is that when you reach this part of the game, Borderlands 1 very heavily changes tone. For being about, growing and building up your arsenal, preparing for some inevitable something or another. Instead, you're focusing much more heavily on the big bad, the finale of the game, the storyline, if you will, should you count much of this as storyline, that leads to the end game. Now, reality of this is, it's a lot all at once. Effectively, to sum up the beginning, or what leads to this, after defeating Baron Flint, the Crimson Lance comes down and attacks the entirety of the Salt Flats, as well as the surrounding area. This is partially due to the fact that the Crimson Frontonomy, as well as their main HQ, is off the side of the Salt Flats, which is something that I don't think very many of the characters in-game actually knew about, partially because of the influence of Baron Flint. But more than that, we also end up in the situation where the Crimson Lance and their affiliated groups shut down the Echo Network, shutting down all ease of communication systems across all of Pandora. This was intended to ignite chaos through the entirety of the land of Pandora as a whole. And so, you, the character, the player, ripped through the Crimson Frontonomy, reset the Echo Network, and are told almost immediately that the entirety of the world is falling apart, that the gate or the vault will open momentarily, and that your job is to get to it as soon as possible. Failure to get to the vault will lead to something, anything. Now, it is pushed or believed at this moment in time that your final boss was going to be Commandant Steele. And honestly, I can see it. Commandant Steele had shown up in many circumstances just as a kind of a side character, a voice of something going wrong in the background. That was intended to be, hey, by the way, this is what's going on, this is what I'm doing, you must cease doing what you're doing because you're a bandit in her eyes. And everything belonging to the vault belongs to the Atlas Corporation. I love that little side effect of it. She wants very deeply to be able to take the power of the vault for her own and bring the Atlas Corporation just that little bit further, a little bit farther ahead of the curve in terms of the power that it possesses. She is set up as the final boss. We do not get to fight her. And I think that's one of the first really big reversals in the franchise that came up, is that this is what you're intending to do. This is what you've been aiming to do. This is how the game has been pushing it. And it never really worked the way you anticipated. Welcome to the Iridian Frontonomy. A battle up the side of a volcanic mountain, aiming to you're in the middle of a war zone right now. On one side of the war zone, you have the Iridian. On the other, Atlas. And you're somehow stuck in the middle. Now, what I love about this, in and of itself, is that the Iridians and the Atlas Corporation are fighting neck and neck to try to get to the top of this mountain. The Iridians have one goal in mind, which is simply put, salvation. They want to keep the Destroyer a parasite, if you will. A giant planet-eating Cthulhu monster held inside of what could very easily be considered Pandora's box. However, every 200 years, the gate, the vault itself, opens. When the vault opens, it is intended to be used as an opportunity to feed the Destroyer. Because feeding it, unironically, is what keeps it pacified enough that it won't break the entire planet that it's being held within. Now, I like this kind of side of the story because it means that the Iridians, when they went about creating what I could easily consider Pandora's box, when they created it, they really didn't have a long-term solution. They knew that eventually, somehow, some way, they would have to open the vault again just to feed the thing and, run away. But reality is that I don't think they had a full guesstimation or full plan as to what it was that they were aiming for as the final execution, the final goal for this entire setup, shall we say. And I like that. Unfortunately, a lot of Borderlands world building and lore is around the fact that entities of higher power, of incredible strength, at the time of the problem's initial inception, were unable to solve it themselves. Whether due to technology or just raw power, they couldn't do it. And so, we end up in this situation where the Vault Hunters, unironically looking for wealth, fame, power, end up falling into this circumstance where they're the last line of defense in a war that we're never really sure was coming. We had been under the understanding that the war itself was going to be with mega corporations, that the battle was going to be with greed, if you will. But I believe that, having played through the games as often as I have, the war itself that is mentioned as part of the lore of the pre-sequel ties very heavily back to this idea of the characters being, shall we say, heroes or warriors in a grand battle against the unknown, against beings of an incredible strength, incredible power. And maybe that's just me, but beings like the Sirens, beings like the Destroyer, or even the Warrior, coming up and being these incredibly powerful entities with one or two major skills that really showcase, hey, yeah, we are really outmatched by this thing, I think is interesting. Setting aside these problems with these world-ending monsters, even just as a temporary solution while we deal with the immediate threat, is honestly a fantastic strategy. Because, yeah, our technology currently cannot match the power of these Cthulhu monsters. I don't want to say that it did, or would, for that matter. But I believe that once the technology of the average entity, the average world viewer or whatnot, came and matched or came close to the power of the Iridians, that is when the world started to change in terms of its output, in terms of the likelihood of dealing with these threats. Now, Borderlands 1 has kind of this really weird circumstance crop up. And the fact of this circumstance is that the Destroyer is not destroyed. It cannot be eliminated, not in its entirety. It is an immortal being, a parasite capable of leeching off of anything and everything around it. And because it is effectively a giant parasite, it is incredibly dangerous. And also incredibly focused on certain aspects. It cannot be destroyed. It is immortal. At least in its current form. Therefore, the final battle of the game, the one that is supposed to win over the Borderlands and save the world, is a battle of attrition. It is a battle against an entity that was intended to be significantly more powerful than your Vault Hunter. Was intended to be more than the sum of its parts. And dare I say, was intended to be an entity that changed the course of history for the Borderlands, and not necessarily for the better. Anywho, we are officially starting the battle with the Destroyer. And if I'm being honest, I love this battle for spectacle. But this battle is not one that I think I have ever had a, oh yeah, this is a really tough battle mentality. I've always kind of treated it as more of a formality. Getting here is the hard part. Completing the mission and duking it out with the big bad evil guy, that's the easy part. But now that we're here, how are we actually going to fight the Destroyer? Well, the same way we fought everything else. With a pair of... I don't know, would you call them hams on the end of cannons? I don't know. Point being, everything that has happened up to this point follows the same basic thread. The Destroyer will be defeated the same way everything else has been. With a pair of Rock'em Sock'em robot arms. And Commandant Steele is a donut. You know, all things considered, I think it's fitting. The Destroyer. Now, looking at the honest circumstance here, just going up and bonking it and smacking around the tentacles will do enough. I am doing enough damage that the health bar is declining. Which means, in theory, as long as I can keep up the pressure, which admittedly is the hard part, we're good. Now, there are kind of 3 stages to this fight. The early stage is all about it just kind of flailing and slapping around. It's trying to get its hand on the player to make itself more powerful, to have a snack because Commandant Steele wasn't eaten, she was just donutted. And Rick has this wonderful circumstance of the Berserk mode heals faster than the damage the Destroyer can output. Therefore, as long as we're in... Okay, that's a weird visual. As long as we are within, bonking range, the Destroyer can't really do much of anything to us. Now, take it as you will. I personally think that it's fine, but in a deathless run, I remember this boss being a heck of a lot harder, partially because I was trying to beat the game without without dying whatsoever, and I ran out of ammunition against this thing. Because the Destroyer does not have raw physical damage output on its side. What the Destroyer has on its side, what makes it so powerful, is the fact that the Destroyer has an absurd amount of health. Now having handled 3 separate full damage output rage modes for Brick. And I know full well that Brick has more than enough healing capability to outmatch or outpace the destruction or damage potential of the destroyer. But I don't really think that it's something that I really planned for properly. The destroyer is an incredibly powerful entity, but it feels weaker than virtually anything else I fought in terms of what it can do to me. And I think that is both kind of by design. The destroyer, for lack of better terms, was never intended to be the penultimate challenge. Rather, everything leading up to it was. And that's the part that I like about this particular final boss. It was intended to be something big, sure. But when it came down to it, what it ended up doing was simply being a damage sponge. Can you output enough damage in this amount of time to defeat the destroyer? The answer? Absolutely. So, with the destroyer defeated, you know, I don't understand. The destroyer's eye is still intact. Continuity errors.
The vault. I'm sorry I couldn't warn you about what was in it. But for you to be there to stop it, it couldn't have unfolded any other way. You did well, and your actions haven't gone unrewarded. The key won't open the vault for another 200 years, but I'm sure Tanis will pay you quite the fortune for it. Now go. I'll be watching.
I love this moment. Hyperion is still watching Pandora. Angel is part of Hyperion. You've got that little bit of lore just from this moment. And the first nod towards the DLC. The Interplanetary Ninja Assassin. I love that. Partially because it kind of ties everything together. The game itself has been pushing towards these more fantastical and funny situations, and I think that the Interplanetary Ninja Assassin Claptrap was a nice touch. Anywho, I have nowhere to go. Why do I have nowhere to go? It should be like middle of nowhere or like the overpass or... Oh, I haven't picked up the vault key yet. Yep, that'll do it. Anyways, I know this is a fair bit shorter than my videos tend to usually be. But part of the reason behind it is because I wanted to give a sense of finality to the base game. And now, having beaten the base game without firing a single bullet, not just beaten it, but completed every single side mission, the question remains, how much more can we do? So if you don't mind continuing this journey alongside me, next time we're going to be hitting Jacob's Cove, where we are going to start going ham and fighting back a zombie army with nothing more than a pair of hands. Because if there's one thing that we've proven so far, it's that you don't need a gun to deal damage in Borderlands. Far from it. All you need is throwing hands. So, if you like what you see, I would love if you left a like, a subscribe, and maybe, just maybe a comment. Drop in next time.